Hello, good morning and welcome to this Logistics Manager webinar sponsored by Daycar Systems Group. My name is Nick Bradley and I am the editor of Logistics Manager magazine. And it's especially pleasing to see so many of our readership online this morning. You are all very welcome. Logistics Manager is also the official media partner for the Intralogistics exhibition, taking place this year on the 1st and 2nd of July at the Ricoh Arena in Coventry. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty excited to escape the confines of my house, and I'm looking forward to meeting many of you there. Intralogistics is a superb opportunity for logistics professionals looking for solutions to their current and future challenges, of which there are many. I'm also your host for this morning's session, entitled Beyond Brexit, the realities of trading with the European Union and moving goods between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, which almost 4 months into this new trading environment is a topic that many of you will no doubt be interested in and indeed may have justifiable concerns about, as well as questions to pose to our guest speaker this morning, Paul Sweeney. Paul is the Vice President of Sales and Country Manager for the UK and Ireland at Daycar. He is a specialist in the solutions and technology that automate and create value for today's global supply chains. With more than 15 years experience in helping businesses transform their operations with technology, Paul has previously held roles as a Chief Technology Officer for logistics software businesses and has worked both in the UK and the USA. Daycar is a global leader in providing software as a service solutions for logistics intensive businesses that drive supply chain operational efficiency and regulatory compliance. Solutions include Daycar's e-customs and route optimization software, both of which have been in heavy demand recently with the increase in e-commerce and home delivery, and as supply chains adapt to post-Brexit trade. A few weeks ago, Daycar published the findings of its latest Brexit research report, Beyond Brexit, the realities of Brexit for UK-EU cross-border trade. Following its 2020 research on Brexit preparedness of UK companies, this latest report analysed how businesses have been affected by both Brexit and the COVID-19 pandemic and the level of uncertainty around the future. Undertaken by Sapio Research during March of this year, the interviews with supply chain managers assess the specific elements of EU trade that have been affected, the resulting disruption, and the expected performance of supply chains in 2021. As Paul will outline in his presentation, Brexit has thrown many businesses into a spin. So the combination of COVID-19 on top of Brexit has created unprecedented challenges for businesses of every size in every market. Confidence has been affected. Paul may touch upon this, and without giving away any spoilers, 3/4 or 76% of companies surveyed for the research stated that COVID-19 had disrupted their Brexit response. On the flip side though, one interesting finding is that almost 1/5 or 19% are actually thriving in a post-Brexit economy, with 35% of electronics, computer and telecommunications companies enjoying a positive outcome. Overall, the research demonstrates that with the changes due from July through to January 2022, which Paul will discuss in more detail, early preparation is, once again, crucial to avoiding expensive disruption. So in this Logistics Manager webinar, sponsored by Daycar, we will look at how businesses have, in reality, been affected by the changes and the level of certainty or uncertainty around the future and further changes from 1st of July this year. Before we begin, I would just like to encourage viewers to ask questions throughout the presentation via the question and answer box at the bottom of the screen. Please remember to submit your name, job title and company when you do so. I will pose as many questions as possible to Paul in the time available following the end of his presentation. Also, a recording of this webinar will be made available to view on demand tomorrow morning via logisticsmanager.com. And with this, it's time to hear from Paul. Over to you, Paul.
Nick, thank you very much for that. I'll just share my screen here. And see if the technology will work for me. So hopefully that's, you can see that, Nick? Can you? So hopefully
I can't see that actually, Paul.
You can't. Let me just check. Is that better? Can you see that now? Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thanks, Nick, for the introduction. So, as Nick mentioned, we Descartes have carried out research in the UK here on the impact of Brexit. We actually carried out research back in July of last year as well, which was looking at the preparedness and potential views and of risks and challenges that people saw as we approach Brexit. So we carried out the research in February of this year to see what the land looked like and what people's views and experiences were. So I'm going to cover that this morning here, and then, as Nick mentioned, we can sort of take questions as well as at the end, but forward them into Nick as we go through here. Just a little bit, first of all, more on Descartes. So in terms of Descartes, we are a public company based out of Canada, but with a global presence and a significant presence in the UK and Europe. Around about 40% of our revenues and staff are based out of Europe. One of the things which, as we went through 2020 and into 2021, one of the things which we were definitely sort of privileged and glad to have is a strong financial position, which helped us come through 2020 with COVID coming in hugely unexpectedly last year. And one of the things which enables us to do that is really the breadth globally, as well as industry breadth in our customer base and where our revenues come from. Enabled us to come through the year strongly and with growth as well. One of the things which we are very sort of strong in and have continued to do is invest heavily in our technology and in our roadmaps, and enabling us to continue to develop our roadmaps to meet sort of market demands and stay ahead of the market demands. So sort of in the UK here, as we went through 2020 and approached the end of the Brexit transition, the whole emergence of the Northern Ireland Protocol and the use of CDS in Northern Ireland was something which our forward investment in our roadmap had positioned us very, very well to adapt to quickly, as we had already sort of invested heavily in being ready for CDS in the UK. We're also privileged to have a broad set of leading brands and a deep set of customers, and what this enables us to do is to sort of gain visibility of what the demands of the markets and various markets around the world are, and from that get to the innovation to drive our technology base forward and drive our products forward. Many people think that so innovation in software comes from people sitting in a dark room, somewhere thinking of clever things to do, but that's not the reality. The reality is that innovation in software comes from understanding and being in touch with your customers and getting the feedback from customers of what challenges are coming into their businesses, and then being able to have the technology experts to help turn that into products, and having a broad customer set has enabled us to continue to do that with our roadmaps. Again, just in terms of Nick mentioned that Descartes has a number of products and capabilities in and around sort of customs and regulatory compliance. This slide here is just really showing the breadth of and how we categorize our product set. So over on the right-hand side there, you can see the customs and regulatory compliance products, which is where our e-customs and PENT and CSP products sit, and also our safety security declaration products as well over there. But other than that, we also, as you move towards to the left here on this slide, you can see that global trade in general, so free trade agreements, product classifications is another area that we have a strong product set. Also, e-commerce, so e-commerce shipping and fulfillment, again, very, very sort of busy through 2020. Round to the transportation, routine and mobile and home delivery, again, sort of areas which were incredibly busy as we went through 2020. So the breadth of the products meant that we were particularly busy in 2020 as sort of COVID unleashed into the community and increased that sort of need for home delivery. All of our products, or the vast majority of our products, are cloud or SaaS-based products, so they sit out there on the network. What that really means, or one of the things that means, is that there's a lot of visibility of data that's moving around businesses to business and business to customer. And what that meant is that as we came into the early stages of 2020 and lockdown came into play across the world through February and March, we saw through the drop in messaging on logistics chains. There's the impact of what lockdown meant to organizations and to industry in general. So we could see through the data that we were collecting that sort of the supply chains in the world were slowing down, grinding to a halt at the beginning of last year. And then as the UK entered its lockdown and retail closed down, there was an immediate sort of drop in transactions that you could see there as well. But then as really it kicked in quite quickly, it was really sort of from roughly the end of March, we saw the UK drop in its retail transactions. But by the time you got to Easter, towards the sort of middle of April last year, we started to see through our e-commerce data that the e-commerce in the UK was now running at so twice the peak volume it had seen back in the sort of Christmas period of 2019, and it hit that peak volume. It hit those sort of twice the peak volumes somewhere around about the middle of April, and it continued running at that for quite a long time. So we could see very, very quickly the impacts of COVID on the UK economy, and likewise as we came into Brexit and through Brexit, we were able to see also the impacts of Brexit on the UK economy and the customs world. So in general, right, as we looked at approaching Brexit through 2020, the predictions out there were quite varied in what the impact would be in terms of volumes of transactions hitting the customs world and what the multiplier might be there. So there was figures of 10 times was generally where people went to as a multiplier. From what we have seen, it hasn't quite hit 10 times the volumes of pre-Brexit. At the moment, it's running around about, from what we're seeing, around about 8 times the volume of declarations that were in the market pre-Brexit, so towards the end of 2020. So around about 8 times that volume. I think that we can still see that is growing, and I think as so the impact of COVID starts to diminish through 2021, and I think there's potentially still some impact of COVID left in the market to be felt there. As well, particularly with Europe. But as that starts to recede, and as the sort of import market in the UK starts to pick up again, then I suspect that the volumes will potentially get up to that prediction of a tenfold increase on pre-Brexit levels. So then just maybe moving on to the research that took place, or that we ran in February of this year that Nick described. Really we were looking to just understand how ready were the importers and exporters for the 1st of January. How have they been impacted since then? And then in that impact, sort of trying to judge the level of certainty they feel about going forward. We were also very interested in, was there a link between preparation made before the 1st of January and outcome post the 1st of January, and trying to understand that linkage in there as well. We also wanted to see what we could determine around and get some visibility on the impact of the COVID generally on the global supply chains by looking at impact on EU supply chains and global supply chains, rest of world supply chains as well, and how that looked. So it's first of all maybe just looking at so the overall high level how has the UK leaving EU impacted your business was generally the question we asked in that research. And there you can see here, we've categorized this into sort of those who had a negative impact, felt there was a negative impact on their business and were seeing a negative impact, and they're categorized as strugglers. And then I think Nick mentioned the figure of 19% down there at the bottom, which is generally the people who are doing somewhat better or view it more positively than pre-Brexit. So those are the thrivers. So you can see here, 43% strugglers, 19% thrivers. If you looked at those figures, you'd say that's fundamentally negative. However, the interesting part is the blue line in the middle. There's like a large number, the biggest number here are seeing neither a positive or negative effect. So 39% neither positive or negative. If you were to take that overall, then overall, sort of the impact has been less than maybe we would have expected. So the impact being 43% negative, with 57% either not affected or more positive, which is maybe a surprising sort of a surprising stat there, given the level of anxiety as we approach Brexit. Looking forward and looking at the level of certainty and the ongoing impact of Brexit, which is quite sort of subjective or objective view here. Again, looking at this, there's 35% feeling less certain about the outlook for their business moving forward through the rest of 2021 and onwards. As you look at that and look underneath the detail of that, and there is a white paper which you can get from our website as well, which gives more detail and more breakdown. And Nick called out some of the breakdown figures on that on the intro as well. But feel free to download that white paper. But those who feel less certain about their business, positivity going forward. Quite a lot of sole traders in there, but also food and drink industry. And I think the food and drink industry, when you look at the reality of Brexit and frontiers and regulations, food and drink industry has probably been one of the hardest hit in terms of what they've had to cope with, because they have not just had to cope with the concept of sort of safety and security declarations, of import declarations into EU countries and exports out of the UK. But on top, they have to cope with sort of veterinarian certificates and psychosanitary certificates and so on in there, which adds complexity to what they need to address in continuing to trade UK, EU, and particularly with the Northern Ireland Protocol and Northern Ireland from a customs perspective remaining within the EU, and the amount of food and drink trade that crosses there, that was particularly sorely felt by those organisations. And I'm sure everybody's aware of the impact on the shellfish industry in the UK into the EU as well. So that food and drink industry more significantly impacted than others. The other thing to say probably about that, which is probably a theme of 2021 and onwards, is the role of sort of increasing digitalization and digital transformation, whatever term you want to put on it. But the idea that businesses that are going to thrive and are thriving have increased their level of digitization and digital data that they operate within their business rather than paper transactions in there. And it's certainly fair to say that whole area of sort of psychosanitary and veterinarian certificates and so on is not as, from a government and regulatory perspective, is not as digitized and easy to get digital access to as the core of the customs systems in the UK. And that is a a definite sort of cause and effect of the impact the food and drink industry has suffered in the early days of Brexit here. Looking at those who are feeling more certain, not surprisingly, larger companies are feeling more certain, having made investments, sort of to cope with Brexit, and having, in general, digitized more. They've been in a stronger position. Tech companies, again, linked with digital data within their businesses, again, have a more positive outlook of Brexit going forward. But again, the largest number here, right in the middle, is neutral. So then, just looking at some of the challenges and the impact of those challenges due to Brexit. So the question asked here was, so what have you had to deal with in trading with the EU and Northern Ireland? What are the main things there that have caused you a challenge? So you can see here, not surprisingly, so delays in the supply chain. So 40% of the respondents put, delays in the supply chain as being the biggest challenge, and then costs of imports, and then in third position here, third challenge was the getting to grips with the whole sort of customs declarations and the need for customs declarations as the third challenge. So I think there again, delays in the supply chain, 40%. I think as we approached the end of the Brexit transition period, there was probably a strong view that delays in supply chains were going to be significant. I suspect that the view would have been that it would have been greater than 40% impacted by that, but it remains a significant impact in there. To what extent, were people expecting these challenges and disruptions to occur? So, the interesting bit to me here is if you look at the bottom of this chart first, you see sort of customs declarations and increased cost of imports, safety, security declarations. I think those three items were probably well spoken about and sort of relatively well understood as being linked to Brexit, and the need for organizations to address customs and be prepared for increased cost of imports. So it's not a surprise that they were expected disruptions to businesses. Then at the top, we've got the tariff payments and import quotas as being the most unexpected disruption to their businesses. So here, sort of with in the end, a free trade agreement being agreed between the UK and the EU, the fact that tariff payments and import quotas are relevant and have come into play now, largely because of the rules of origin for products. It was an unexpected and a level of sort of complexity within the trade domain that wasn't sort of fully understood or fully seen by organizations coming into 2021. So I think that sort of ties in with tariff payments and import quotas being the most unexpected of the disruptions that occurred. So ready, steady, cook. Here, this is just looking at, so we're going to look at here is preparedness. So really this, this is, did you have the ingredients that you needed to be ready for Brexit? Did you have a method and a process that was going to get you to be ready for Brexit? And most significantly, did you start your cooking in time to have the meal ready for dinner when people wanted their dinner? Is sort of the ready, steady, cook side of this. So preparing for Brexit, when did you start preparing for Brexit was the question here. And we looked, back 2018, 2019, there was a long run-in, as everybody, I'm sure, can remember, to Brexit eventually occurring. So 2018, 2019, organizations were preparing, and 2020 was where the bulk of organizations, 46%, started to prepare for Brexit in 2020, which in hindsight is probably late, but for most organizations to start preparing for something as significant as Brexit in 2020. Certainly, the largest column there, 24% second half of 2020. That is very late, and we saw the result of that as we sort of came through the second half of last year. The 17% on the very left-hand side here, there's definitely that is a high number, and it is something we saw in the very last weeks of December. Certainly while at a dinner on Christmas Eve, I got a call from an organization who were moving, I think it was up to 1,000 vehicles a year from Eastern Europe through the EU into the UK. And they were asking the question, what do they need to do to be ready for Brexit? And I think they had 5 days left or something like that before they needed to start doing something. So certainly many organizations left it very late in the second half of 2020. And some left it too late altogether. So the next bit we wanted to look at here was, well, is there a connection between this preparedness and how people are doing now? So going back to those survivors and strugglers and trying to plot them against where did they start becoming ready for Brexit. Then this is what this graph is trying to show here, again, stretching from 2018 on the right-hand side over to 2020 on the left-hand side, and then pretty much 2021 on the far left there. But immediately you can see here that 33%, which is the largest number here, is thrivers. So 33% of thrivers started to prepare for Brexit in the first half of 2020. 24% of thrivers were preparing in the second half of 2019. So combined there's almost 60% of those who are thriving now were preparing, sort of a year to probably 8 months out from Brexit. You can see there in 2020 that those who are struggling, 31% of those didn't begin to start preparing until the second half of 2020 there as well. So again, there definitely, from what we can see in this sort of data, is that there is a definite connection between being prepared, getting prepared early, practicing, training, changing your processes, and knowing how to handle the event, and getting that preparedness early for an event such as Brexit definitely pays dividends for those who have managed to achieve that. And that's something which we should, and industry in general needs to keep in mind as we go through 2021, because there is a date of the 1st of July 2021, which is another date for Brexit, when anybody who has been using EIDRs, so entry into declarant records, for their imports into the UK, so hasn't been gone through the full customs declarations, of which there are quite a few out there. Those declarations, supplementary declarations, have to begin to be submitted on the 1st of July 2021. So anybody who was bringing in imports in January of this year and keeping a record of those in their own records, then those supplementary declarations need to start being submitted from the 1st of July of this year. The government did extend that deferral period associated with that to the 1st of January 2022, but it's a 6-month rolling deferral. So in other words, anything that was brought in January, the 6 months to have your supplementary declaration expires in July. So you must have your supplementary declarations in by July. The extension that they provided recently to January 2022 will be anybody who is importing in July of 21 will have a 6-month deferral of their supplementary declaration to January 2022. But anybody who has already been importing in January 2021 must get the supplementary declarations in July of 2021. So the 1st of July 2021 is the next key date in there. So being prepared for that is something that organizations must have already started and have in place now. Likewise, there will be a change in the need for safety and security declarations, so ICS, ENS messages coming into the UK from the 1st of January 2022, and that's when GVMS, the goods vehicle movement system, will come into play as well from the 1st of January 2022. So that's another key milestone, key event in there. The safety and security declarations is something that needs to be in place, as GVMS does, for goods coming in to the UK 1st of January 2022. So again, organizations need to prepare and be ready for that event. So there's two dates to keep in mind there: 1st of July 2021 and 1st of January 2022, and getting prepared well in advance of those will enable you to potentially be a thriver as you go through the rest of 21 and 22. This is just a view on what what actions did people take to prepare for Brexit, and the summary on the right hand side here sort of probably calls out a few items here. Certainly engaging with their customers, sort of importing early, purchasing systems that would enable them to handle the supply chain and logistics challenges that Brexit threw up here. And then really from a smoothness point of view, the more the digital data is used within your businesses to deal with the regulatory authorities, be they just customs authorities, safety and security, or sort of food and drink, agricultural systems, the more that you have digitized within your system, then the more chances you have of being a thriver in the post-Brexit world. The digital transformation in there is really about capturing data from your customers digitally, handling the data internally digitally, so that you can automate and speed up all of the transactions that are required with the regulatory authorities through a digital process in there. Another one which we've seen used quite a bit in the run up to the transition period ending, and again it's something which we're seeing now as an increasing sort of trend in the market, is that increasingly organizations are looking to use enhanced sort of customs authorizations to deal with trade with the EU to enable them to deal better. So examples of this are things like an ETSF. Many organizations are now starting to utilize ETSFs and transits to enable them to deal with, to minimize delays at frontiers and to enable them to handle the customs declarations away from the frontier in an environment and in a location that they have a good level of control over and a good level of system support within. So those sorts of authorizations and facilities, we're seeing a growing demand for those. That grew through 2020, and we're still seeing that growing right now as well. One which jumps out here as well is probably the use of customs warehousing and duty management. So that is definitely an area that people are investing in and getting to grips with, where they're looking to avoid the double hit on duty. So if you're importing goods into the UK from outside the EU, so electronic goods from the Far East into the UK, warehousing them here, then either bringing them into domestic circulation here in the UK or onward supply into the EU. Those organizations are finding themselves being hit twice by duty. issues there, once coming into the UK and then once going into the EU. So many of those organisations are now looking at the use of customs warehousing to import into the customs warehouse and defer the payment of duties, so that they don't pay the duty for the UK until it goes into domestic circulation in the UK. But more significantly, they can defer and not have to pay the double duty when they re-export to the EU. They can export to the EU and just pay EU duties there. So it's an example again of where people are using an enhanced sort of customs mechanisms and authorizations to achieve to make their life easier and to make reduce the costs associated around those imports and tariffs that some people have been hit with unexpectedly in their businesses. And again, you sort of that use of customs warehousing and ETSFs and so on, and those authorizations all require an increased level of sort of digital transformation in there. So then we wanted to just look at here in terms of how EU supply chains performed, and then look at rest of the world supply chains as well. So again, here the numbers are very, they're very similar to the whole concept of thrivers and strugglers in the figures. So again, we can see here people who have seen their EU supply chain perform below what it was pre-Brexit, 40% in there. Those who have seen it perform either better or much better, 17%. So if you remember, the number of thrivers out there was 19%. So there's, the performance of your supply chain and whether you thrive or struggle in the world post-Brexit is very, very closely linked to the ability to keep the supply chain moving smoothly for you from the EU and to the EU. And again, a large number in the middle performing as expected in there. So if that, sort of hidden within these figures somewhere is sort of the impact of COVID on the overall supply chains. So what we then looked at was what was the rest of the world supply chain performance like over the same period. So here we can see that in terms of performing not as well, somewhat poorer or much poorer than it was pre-Brexit or pre 2021. 25% are saying that the rest of the world supply chain is performing less well than it was prior to 2021. So somewhere in that 40% of Brexit impact, there's also an impact here of supply chains globally and the impact of COVID on those supply chains causing disruption as well in there. So for supply chains to get back to normal, then certainly they need to sort of get through the impact and ongoing impact of COVID on those supply chains. And they also need to get through the impact of Brexit on those supply chains. And the impact of Brexit, certainly there's a number of ways in which the impact of Brexit can be minimized by relocating distribution centers, by changing sources of goods, but also by, for those supply chains that you are using from the EU into the UK and UK Northern Ireland, as those supply chains persevere beyond Brexit, then the more you can do digitally in those supply chains, then the smoother they will run for you. And as we approach, sort of the 1st of July 2021, they're conscious that there is a lot of supplementary declaration data that needs to be collected by organizations and digitized to enable it to be submitted as the 1st of July is reached and onwards in there. And that applies, sort of both for EU into UK, it applies for Northern Ireland as well in there. So that is certainly something to watch out for as we go through 2021. And then so the things which were impacting again, so the EU supply chain called out here, but delays in delivering and receiving goods was the highest there. Loss of demand from the EU, customer dissatisfaction. The ones near the bottom here, sort of unable to stockpile goods for export, so laying off of staff. These ones are ones which are significant, but are are probably an indicator that the impact on those areas is probably not as sort of bad as had maybe been predicted prior to Brexit. Things like delays in delivering and receiving goods are issues which have can be addressed and have potential solutions to them in the medium term. So the view here would be that the impact on the supply chain can be reduced further as organizations move through 2021 and into 2022. So, sort of the other concerns and potential impacts that organizations are highlighting in, as we go through 2021 here, there is quite a bit of, concern around the capacity of the brokerage market, customs brokerage market, to handle the declarations that will be required, particularly as you approach July 21 and as you move into January 22. So here again, sort of 43% concerned about the capacity of the brokerage market to handle the increase in declarations. So, so from what we have seen, as I mentioned at the beginning, from the data that we're seeing from our infrastructure and SaaS platforms, we're seeing probably a multiplying effect of about eightfold on the level of declaration data moving around industry and into the regulators today compared with pre-Brexit. That has another, sort of probably 25 to 30% more to add to it as we go through the 1st of July and the 1st of January deadlines, and the industry recovers from the impact of COVID. So there's still a significant level of customs declarations going to appear in the market is our expectation based on the data we're seeing out there today. So the concern around the brokerage market, 43% there. We then tried to look at sort of where were people seeing and expecting to see that impact, and this is again excuse me, again, if you look at the 26%, the highest measure there, this is saying that people are expecting the second half of 2021 to be where the customs brokerage market starts to reach its capacity in the UK. So the concern is that by the time that we go through 1st July 2021 and supplementary declarations start to become required and necessary in the market, and as we then as that increases as you get towards January 2022, there's a concern that the brokerage market will start to reach capacity. So we're certainly seeing from our view of the market, we're seeing many organizations in the brokerage space increasing their capacity, and they have been and continue to do that today. So that is definitely a trend we're seeing there, which is people and organizations trying to quite rapidly increase the capacity that they have within the brokerage market. So we're definitely seeing that happening. It's interesting to see the people who believe it's too early to tell, the 21%, as to whether there is going to be an issue in the brokerage market or not. So the retail wholesale space, generally it's too early to tell, They have traditionally already been significant users of the brokerage business, and they've been traditional, experienced users of custom systems in many different ways in many different countries on import and export. So they have, from our experience, felt more, I guess, more comfortable with their ability, excuse me, to handle in-house and with their customs brokerage partners the impacts of Brexit. And in terms of the data here, I think it's followed through to their view of the market. So quite a significant number of organizations think it's too early to tell and are not as concerned. And then quite a number of organizations looking at the second half of 2021 as being an area, a time frame of concern. We then looked at COVID and tried to see is there a direct sort of impact of COVID on the market as well in relation to Brexit. So here, as people went through 2020, did COVID impact your ability to prepare for Brexit? And this is the largest. I think this is the largest response to any single question. So in that 76% felt that it had either been somewhat disruptive or very disruptive to them, and roughly the same number of businesses felt the same thing here. Large businesses definitely felt this, as did sole traders. That they had their ability to prepare for Brexit negatively impacted here, and this is not not hugely unexpected. Certainly, we again, as we were going through 2020, the number of customers and teams that we were dealing with that had staff who were furloughed or staff who were disrupted in terms of their ability to get to offices and work smoothly was very high. And that was it came at a key point in that sort of first half of 2020, which the evidence we've seen is that if you manage to get your Brexit preparations in place strongly in the first half of 2020, then your outcome post-Brexit was more likely than not that you would be a thriver. If you were unable to get your preparations underway and up and going strongly in the first half of 2020, then you were going to struggle post the 1st of January. So, and the impact of COVID was most strongly felt in those key months of the first half of 2020 in there. So I think the impact of COVID has been felt significantly on preparations for Brexit as well. And I think we should keep in mind that although we're in the UK in a very strong position now, it would seem, on COVID, there is potentials for further impact, and the EU countries still are probably not free from the impact of COVID on their supply chains as well. So that was pretty much it. I'll hand back to Nick, just in terms of questions.
Paul, thank you very much. Yeah, that was a lot of information there, very comprehensive. I think my takeaway from that was fail to prepare, prepare to fail.
Yes, yeah.
Could you, before I start sifting through some of these questions, could you possibly give us some information about the research itself? How many companies, breakdown of companies, type of companies, etc.
Yeah, so the research was done on companies who were customers across a sort of sample of the Descartes customer set. I think I think it was over 200 or so companies that were surveyed in there, and it was across sort of sole traders to large enterprises, and then the people that were surveyed in there as well ranged across the different roles within those companies, from sort of operational staff through to managers, through to business leaders in those organizations. And the survey was run through February of this year.
Okay. One of the questions I have here, I mean, you touched on the changes coming in from 1st of July. What are the implications of these on companies that are importing goods into the UK?
So the significant impact is on people importing into the UK, as the UK government had provided an easement, which meant that from the 1st of January, you did not have to complete a full sort of customs declaration and submit it into HMRC. And they allowed organizations to record using a mechanism which is referred to as EIDR, so entrant into declarant records. So in other words, keep an electronic record of the fact that the transaction has occurred. Use that then subsequently to complete your customs declaration using a supplementary declaration technique. So the immediate deferral that was given back in January was that there was a 6-month rolling deferment. So in other words, if you were importing in January, you didn't have to complete your declarations for a further 6 months, so July of 2021. If you were importing in May, so month 5, I'm going to get the maths wrong. So if you're importing in May, month 5, you didn't have to complete your declaration until sort of month 11. So in other words, November. So that is still the scenario that's still in place. So anybody who imported in January needs to complete their supplementary declarations in July of this year. So to complete those supplementary declarations, you need to have the data that supports the import that you made back in January. So you need to have all of the the product codes, the quantities, the weights, and so on in there, and categorization of those products to enable your declaration to be completed in July of this year. And you need to be able to get that information into the format of a custom declaration and submit it to HMRC. And that starts from July 1st of this year. The situation was a little bit confused, so earlier, a few weeks ago, when the government said it was extending that easement, as it calls it, through to January the 1st, 2022. So what many, but not all, but many in the industry interpreted that as is I don't need to make any supplementary declarations now until January 2022. That's not the case. If you imported in January of this year, you still have to make your declaration in July of this year. What the easement was, it was announced back in at the end of February, early March, is that in July of this year, that sort of easement, that rolling deferral, 6-month rolling deferral, which was due to come to an end in July, is now being allowed to continue up until the 1st of January. So in other words, if you're importing in July of this year, you still don't have to make your full declaration. You can use EIDR, and then you make your full declaration in January 2022. So it just extended the period over which that rolling 6 months was allowed to run. So it allows it to run further all the way through 2021. But the reality is that July of this year, it means that you have to complete your supplementary declarations, and you will need all of the data to do that for the imports that occurred in January of this year. And the concern there, Nick, that the industry has in general is, have people kept enough data and enough quality data of what the imports were to enable them to compile and create valid customs declarations in July.
And obviously that highlights your point about the companies that are using digitization technologies. That's why they're faring best.
That is why they're faring best, exactly, yeah. Yes.
What sort of technologies are we talking about there?
So really it is sort of technologies that are in industry and have been for quite some time. So it's it's either CRM systems for keeping your purchases, customer purchases in place, quantities, product codes, and so on. It is ERP systems, warehouse management systems, having the data of what was imported held electronically down to the product line items, quantities, weights, to enable you to determine the product classifications of what was imported. So it is a level of detail down to individual SKU level line item data that you're then going to use to create a customs declaration. That's typically found in CRM systems, warehouse management systems, ERP systems. That can then be passed electronically into a customs system, which will map it into a customs declaration to pass that declaration then through a CSP and get it into Chief or CDS.
Excellent. Right, I'm going to hit some questions now from our viewers. Don't forget that the question and answer box there is at the bottom of your screen. So if you'd like to ask Paul a question, that would be fantastic. I've got one here from Mike Hall from Norbremsa. He's the managing director. He says UK to Northern Ireland sales and use of TSS is proving to be more challenging than expected with added effort for customers. Is there a better way for least customer effort to support sales into Northern Ireland, and what are the implications?
So yeah, it's a good question. Like the situation in Northern Ireland was complicated from a technical perspective for customs, because Northern Ireland sits in two jurisdictions. It sits in the EU from a customs jurisdiction point of view, but it also sits within the UK. So the HMRC were forced into a position where they needed to introduce CDS, the new customs declaration system, which was due to come into to the UK to replace Chief, but it had to be somewhat sort of fast-tracked into operation for Northern Ireland, as it could handle this concept of duality in there, whereas Chief was unable to do that. So they had to bring in CDS to handle all customs declarations for Northern Ireland. TSS was set up to help make that an easier prospect for organizations. However, you can, as you would into trading into the rest of the EU, you can use your own customs declaration system and have that prepare the declaration and submit it on your behalf to CDS. And so Descartes provide that solution with CDS. I think we were one of the first or the first to have live declarations going through CDS. So we have customers today who use Descartes software to compile and submit their customs declarations, moving from GB into Northern Ireland, and those declarations end up in CDS. And that can be a fully automated process from your system that has got your order data or your product data across to Descartes customs solution, mapped into a declaration for CDS, and then submitted to CDS with the responses coming back to you as well. So there's nothing different about Northern Ireland in that sort of customs process, customs systems world. The difficulty was that CDS was sort of fast-tracked and pulled forward into operation, and there weren't many people who could communicate it with it electronically. We have a wide number of customers who are doing that, but it's the same process as if you're communicating with Chief to do an import into the UK from the EU. You can use the same process. It's just ending up in CDS rather than Chief. So that's there today, and that may be for organizations that have those electronic backend systems or have the capability to submit their own declarations through a user interface, so have the knowledge to do it through a user interface. Then that's there today and can be used to give an alternative to TSS if that's what organizations need.
Excellent. I've got a question here from Dale Fletcher. He's the EU Transition Advisor from Enterprise Growth Solutions. I'll just paraphrase this. In his role, he has seen many companies of all sizes experiencing severe supply issues where the movement of goods from going out and coming into the UK has been severely affected when in the hands of the major courier companies. It even seems to have affected routes to the USA with the likes of UPS. Is this a COVID issue? He says the world of logistics has changed and so many businesses now rely upon courier services. We've all been guessing at the reasons, but could you possibly give some qualified reasons for that? Yeah, so it's like I'm not sure what the US impact would be other than COVID potentially in there. If you look at couriers in general,
their world, the primary issue that couriers have is understanding what is in the package that they are moving for the end customer. So what is in the package that's been moving, because if they're going to do a customs declaration, which they have to do, then they need to know some level of detail about what the product is that's in that package, what its value is, and so on, other characteristics of the product, so that it can be classified and it can be put into a declaration. So their challenge is understanding what is in the packages that they're getting. That challenge, they need to move on to their large customers, the online retailers, for those guys to provide the data accurately and to the right level of quality. So once that has been put in place and is bedded in, so there's definitely a sort of bedding in this early disruption period that impacted the couriers there, and getting that data to the level of quality and consistency that's required to create the customs declarations. I would expect that to resolve itself as they move through the rest of 2021 and get into the second half of 2021, and they will have fewer and fewer exceptions that they need to handle there. But in the courier world, sending a parcel to a European country, to Germany, and then it's returned. The return package. How do you handle that return? Who's got the electronic data that's going to enable you to do an import declaration when that arrives back in the UK? There's scenarios there in the courier world that becomes very difficult due to the lack of good electronic data in their space. So so their challenge was higher, and when you combine that with their volumes, it is a difficult problem. But I think they will get through that, and you'll begin to see fewer and fewer exceptions as we go through 2021.
Thanks, Paul. Right, these questions are coming through thick and fast now. This is from David Miller. What is the recommended course of action for e-commerce shopping into Europe, with some orders sub 150 euros, so they could use one-stop shop, and some more than 150 euros?
So I think the one-stop shop is strongly the recommended approach on VAT into Europe. One-stop shop will enable you to handle the logistics of importing into e-commerce purchases into Europe much more efficiently. So the goal being to import into one of your facilities in Europe, into one European territory or country, do your declarations there, and the one-stop shop on that. Even if those packages are distributed to other European countries, the one-stop shop should enable, from a system point of view, any of the VAT that is required in the end, destination country, to be resolved by the custom systems within the EU. So in other words, if you have a facility where you land your goods in Belgium and do your declarations in Belgium, then the Belgian systems should then resolve that with the other countries from a VAT perspective that you end up delivering your e-commerce goods to. One of the issues on the e-commerce side that is impacting is the whole concept of, for a better word, landed cost. What's the duty payments that are going to be due on these products? I think the world there of the consumer, there is certainly an increased number of returns occurring, because as that package gets to the end consumer in whatever country it was purchased in, there's an additional payment due on that now, and it's getting rejected and brought back. So we're seeing increasingly that organizations are looking to address that in an online way, so that the purchaser of the e-commerce product has visibility at the point of purchase of what the total cost is going to be to them, and can account for that at that point in time.
I was quite shocked actually by the statistic that 46% of companies didn't start preparing for Brexit until 2020 itself. Why was that? Is it just they didn't know what they were preparing for?
Well, I think it was just uncertainty about what was going to happen politically, and what form of Brexit was going to emerge. I think that as we went through, 2017, 2018, there were so many dates, so many, it's going to happen. Oh no, it's not. It's going to take this form. Oh no, it's not. That happened through 2017, 2018. by the time we got to 2019, there was a level of disbelief, and maybe it's going to change again. It didn't, and even when the date of the 1st of January 2020 as the Brexit, from 9th of January was set as the Brexit date, and the 1st of January 2021 is the end of the transition period. There was still, sort of a feeling among organizations that, well, is it really real? Is it really going to be stuck to or not? I think as we went through 2020, it was clear it was going to be held, but there was still a level of disbelief that it would move again at some point in 2020. So organizations held back to getting their preparation started, and then unfortunately they were hit by COVID once they got into 2020, and that impacted a significant number of organizations.
I've been given the nod that I can take one more question. There are more questions here, but what we'll do is forward these on to you, Paul, and when hopefully you can answer them for us and we can get them back to the audience. I have a question here from Nick Edwards that seems quite pertinent for a lot of small businesses out there. He says, small businesses or business with low value products have seen their costs increase considerably as a percentage due to the import and export declaration charges. Some agents' costs are quite expensive. For some businesses, it is no longer viable to trade with the EU. Do you think these charges will reduce?
Do I think the charges will reduce? Potentially, the charges will reduce, but I think it will take some time. The market demand is high, and the supply of customs brokerage capability to support that demand is low to moderate in there. So the natural market forces are not necessarily going to lower those costs in the market. It may be that there are smaller that there are specialized bureaus that set themselves up to address the small the small traders in there potentially, and they may come to market with a different offering. We haven't seen that happen yet. Equally, whether organizations can look to invest in some form of sort of training of staff to take on self-filing. That's another approach there, which can potentially reduce costs. Also, organizations looking to people like their accountancy firms or to trade bodies to see if there's a way of aggregating a number of smaller organizations into those is another thing which we're beginning to see happen out there. So there's a number of organizations looking to address this. We haven't seen it happen yet. And unfortunately, with demand exceeding supply at the moment, there's not a natural driver in the market to push down costs. Self-filing may be an option there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as I said, we'll get these extra questions to you. And we'll get them answered. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. I would like to thank Paul Sweeney, Vice President of Sales and Country Manager for the UK and Ireland at Descartes, for joining us this morning. I would also like to thank Descartes for sponsoring today's webinar, which again, you'll be able to view on demand from tomorrow morning on logisticsmanager.com. In case you'd like to refer back to the presentation or potentially share it with a colleague. Also, as you can see on your screen right now, Intralogistics, the UK's premier intralogistics and materials handling exhibition. It takes place on the 1st and 2nd of July at the Ricoh Arena in Coventry. Given the UK government's recent announcement that exhibitions can take place from the 17th of May, as long as they're controlled indoor events of up to 1,000 people or 50% of the venue's capacity. And of course, from the 21st of June, I'm sure we're all looking forward to this, there are no restrictions on numbers or capacity. So we're anticipating a very special atmosphere. That's about it. We've come to the end. Thank you all for attending today's session. I'm Nick Bradley, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye.
Thanks, Nick. Bye.
Cheers, Paul.